July 12, 1935, 8:47 p.m., Alhambra Restaurant, corner of 126th Street and 7th Avenue, Harlem, New York. A man standing nearly 6.5 feet tall and weighing 240 pounds of muscle and scar tissue pushes through the frosted glass door. Ulissiz Rollins has just walked into the wrong place, at the wrong time, looking for the wrong man. In exactly 9 minutes, this Chicago giant will be on the floor, mutilated, blind in one eye, crawling through his own blood while 200 people watch in silence. And the man who destroyed him will be sitting at his table, straightening his tie, ordering spaghetti and meatballs like nothing happened. This wasn't a fight. This was a masterclass on the true meaning of power. To understand what happened that night, you first need to understand who Ellsworth Raymond Johnson was. Not the myth, the man. Bumpy was born in Charleston, South Carolina in 1905. By age 10, he already knew the world wasn't going to give him anything. By 15, he'd left his hometown behind, running north after beating a white man who tried to rape his sister. He arrived in Harlem in 1919, just as the cultural renaissance was transforming the neighborhood into Black America's capital. But Bumpy didn't come looking for jazz or poetry. He came looking to survive, and he learned fast. Harlem's streets in the 20s were a chessboard where only the intelligent lived to grow old. Bumpy studied that board like a grandmaster. He worked first for Stephanie St. Clair, an immigrant from Martinique known as Queenie, the numbers queen. She controlled Harlem's illegal lottery, and Bumpy became her right hand, her protector, her enforcer. Not because he was the biggest or the strongest, but because he was the most lethal. By 1935, Bumpy was 30 years old, and they already called him the mayor of Harlem. He wore custom-tailored three-piece suits. He read Langston Hughes and discussed philosophy in jazz clubs. But beneath that gentleman's facade, there was something dark, something cold. A capacity for violence so precise, so calculated, that it terrified even the toughest men in the underworld. That summer of 1935, Harlem was at war. Dutch Schultz, the German Jewish gangster who controlled half of New York, had decided he wanted the numbers racket. All of it. And he didn't care how many black bodies he had to stack to get it. Schultz had sent dozens of men into Harlem. Thugs, collectors, intimidators. Bumpy and his crew of 9 had eliminated them one by one. It was easy. White men stood out in Harlem like bloodstains on snow, but Schultz was desperate. He needed someone who could go toe-to-toe with Bumpy, someone without fear, someone capable of matching Bumpy's violence with more violence. So he made a call to Chicago. Ulissiz Rollins was a beast in the shape of a man. 6'2", 240 pounds of muscle built in prisons and alleyways. In Chicago, they called him the Bull, because once he charged, nothing stopped him. He'd killed 11 men before his 25th birthday, 3 with his bare hands, no weapons. Schultz paid him $5,000 up front, another $10,000 if he eliminated Bumpy Johnson. The instructions were clear. Make it public, make it loud. I want all of Harlem to know what happens when they resist. Rollins arrived in Harlem on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the whole neighborhood knew he was there. Because in Bumpy's territory, the streets had eyes. The shoeshine boys, the newspaper vendors, the women selling flowers on corners. They all worked for Bumpy. By Friday morning, Bumpy knew what hotel Rollins was staying at. He knew what he ate for breakfast. He knew Rollins was carrying a .45 caliber pistol in a shoulder holster and a knife in his boot. And he knew something else. Rollins was watching him. That Friday night, Bumpy had a date. Not with a Harlem girl, but with Helen Lawson, an editor and film critic for Vanity Fair magazine. Helen was white, sophisticated, educated at Vassar College. She wrote Broadway reviews and interviewed movie stars. She was also fascinated by Bumpy Johnson. They'd met 3 weeks earlier at a jazz club. Helen was researching an article about the Harlem Renaissance. Bumpy had been intrigued by this white woman who wasn't afraid to sit in a black club, who asked intelligent questions, who saw Harlem as more than crime and poverty. "Let's have dinner at the Alhambra," Bumpy had suggested. "Best jazz in Harlem, and the food's not bad either." Helen had said yes. The Alhambra Bar and Theater was Harlem royalty. Duke Ellington had played there. Billie Holiday had sung there. On Friday nights, the place packed with 200 people. Musicians, hustlers, intellectuals, everyone who was anyone in Harlem. Bumpy arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. Charcoal gray suit with a burgundy tie. Shoes polished to a mirror shine. His fedora set at a precise angle. He looked like a banker, not a killer. Helen was already at the table. Blue dress and pearls. They ordered drinks. The conversation flowed naturally. She asked him about growing up in Charleston. He asked her about working at a magazine where she was one of 3 women. The jazz quartet was playing something soft and low. The atmosphere was perfect. Then, at 8:47, the door opened. Ulissiz Rollins walked in. Bumpy saw him immediately. The way Rollins moved, shoulders back, eyes scanning the room like a predator, told Bumpy everything. This wasn't a man coming for dinner. This was a man hunting a target. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Rollins smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who'd found what he was looking for. Helen noticed Bumpy's posture shift. The relaxed gentleman she'd been talking to disappeared. In his place was something harder, colder. "Bumpy?" she asked. "Is something wrong?" "No," Bumpy said quietly, not taking his eyes off Rollins. "Everything's fine. Excuse me for just a moment." Rollins made his way through the tables, deliberately, taking his time. He wanted everyone to see this. This was the job Schultz had paid him for. A public execution. When he reached Bumpy's table, he stopped. He was standing. Bumpy was sitting. The power dynamic was clear, or so Rollins thought. "You Bumpy Johnson?" Rollins asked loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Depends who's asking. Dutch Schultz sends his regards. Says you've been a problem. Says problems need solving." The jazz quartet kept playing, but the conversations around them started dying. People could feel something was about to happen. "Tell Dutch," Bumpy said calmly, "that Harlem already solved its problem with him. He just doesn't know it yet." Rollins laughed. Big words for a man sitting down. That's when Bumpy noticed it. Rollins's hand was drifting toward his jacket, toward the pistol in his shoulder holster. And Bumpy made a decision. If Rollins drew that gun, people would die. Innocent people. Helen, the jazz musicians, the waiters, bullets don't care who they hit in a crowded room. So Bumpy moved first. It happened so fast, most people didn't see the beginning, only the end. Bumpy's hand shot out, not toward Rollins, but toward the table. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the steak knife beside his dinner plate. The knife was 6 inches long, serrated edge, sharp enough to cut through bone. Rollins saw the movement. His hand went for his gun, but Bumpy was already moving. He exploded from his chair with a speed that didn't seem human. The chair fell backward. Helen gasped. And Bumpy drove the knife forward. The first cut caught Rollins across the forearm as he drew his pistol. The gun clattered to the floor. The second cut opened Rollins's cheek. By the third cut, Rollins realized he wasn't fighting a man. He was fighting something else. Something that moved like water and struck like lightning. They crashed into a nearby table. Glasses shattered. Food went flying. People screamed and scattered. But Bumpy didn't stop. Cut 4, cut 5, cut 6. Rollins tried to fight back. He was bigger, stronger, but Bumpy was faster. Every time Rollins threw a punch, Bumpy slipped it, and the knife found flesh. Cut 12 caught Rollins across the ribs. Cut 18 opened his shoulder. By cut 24, Rollins was on his knees, and that's when Bumpy went for the eyes. In the chaos, Helen had moved away from the table, pressed against the wall with other terrified patrons. But she couldn't look away. She watched as Bumpy Johnson, the man who'd been discussing Langston Hughes' poetry 5 minutes earlier, methodically destroyed a man twice his size. The knife was an extension of Bumpy's hand. Every movement was precise, calculated. This wasn't rage. This was mathematics. Cut 25 caught Rollins above his left eye. The blade went deep. When Bumpy pulled it back, Rollins's eyeball went with it. The damage was severe, irreversible. Rollins screamed, a sound Helen would hear in her nightmares for years. The entire restaurant had gone silent. Even the jazz quartet had stopped playing. 200 people stood frozen, watching something out of a horror story. Bumpy stood up. Rollins was still on the floor, bleeding, his face a mask of blood. He was conscious but broken, whimpering, and Bumpy, covered in blood that wasn't his own, did something nobody expected. He reached down and straightened his tie. The gesture was so calm, so deliberate, it sent a chill through every person in that room. This man had just destroyed another human being, and he was adjusting his wardrobe like he'd just finished a business meeting. Then Bumpy stepped over Rollins's body, not around it, over it, like Rollins was a puddle in his path. He walked back to his table where his chair still lay on its side. He picked it up, set it upright, sat down. Helen was still standing by the wall, staring at him. Bumpy looked at her and smiled, the same charming smile he'd given her when she arrived. "I apologize for the interruption," he said. His voice was perfectly calm, as if nothing had happened. Then he looked around for their waiter, who was pressed against the bar, white-faced with shock. "Excuse me," Bumpy called out. "Could we get some menus? Seems I've worked up an appetite." The waiter didn't move. Nobody moved. Bumpy picked up a menu himself from a nearby table. He studied it for a moment, then looked up at Helen. "You know what?" he said. "I suddenly have a taste for spaghetti and meatballs." The waiter, hands trembling, took the order. Nobody else in the restaurant moved. They just watched. Helen slowly made her way back to the table. Her legs felt like water. She sat down across from Bumpy, who was calmly wiping blood off his hands with a napkin. "You should go," Bumpy said quietly. "This isn't a place you need to be." But Helen couldn't move. She was in shock, yes, but she was also witnessing something she'd never seen before. A man who just committed extreme violence, sitting there like he was waiting for his morning coffee. 8 minutes later, the spaghetti arrived. The plate was set in front of Bumpy by the same trembling waiter. Steam rose from the pasta. The red sauce looked almost black in the restaurant's dim light. Through the windows, Helen could see an ambulance pulling up outside. Paramedics rushed in to collect Ulissiz Rollins, who was still on the floor, still breathing, but barely conscious. And Bumpy Johnson picked up his fork. He twirled the pasta slowly, deliberately. Then he took a bite. Helen watched, unable to look away, as this man ate. Not quickly, like someone trying to prove a point, but slowly, casually, like he was genuinely enjoying it. "It's good," Bumpy said, glancing up at her. "You should eat something." The police arrived as Bumpy was setting down his fork. By then, an ambulance had already taken Ulissiz Rollins to Harlem Hospital. He would survive, but he'd never see out of his left eye again. The cops knew better than to arrest Bumpy Johnson. Half of them were on his payroll. The other half knew that in Harlem, Bumpy was the law. Self-defense, one officer wrote in his report. Victim drew weapon first. Multiple witnesses confirm. By Saturday morning, the story had spread through Harlem like wildfire. Not just the violence. Everyone in Harlem had seen violence. But the way Bumpy had ended it. The spaghetti. That detail became legendary. Men told their sons. Women told their daughters. That's how Bumpy Johnson handles his business. Cool as ice, even with blood on his hands. The story reached Dutch Schultz by noon. Schultz was in his office at the Harmony Social Club in the Bronx when his lieutenant came in, white-faced. "Boss, Rollins is in the hospital. Bumpy Johnson cut him to pieces in a restaurant, took his eye out." Schultz put down his cigar. "Is Rollins dead?" "No, then he failed." Schultz stood up and walked to the window. "You know what the problem is? We keep thinking we can intimidate these Harlem boys. We keep thinking if we send someone bigger, meaner, stronger, they'll back down." Schultz was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would change the course of mob history. "We leave Harlem alone." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Bumpy Johnson just sent a message. And the message is Harlem's not for sale." 6 months later, Dutch Schultz would be dead, killed on orders from Lucky Luciano. And Bumpy would negotiate the deal that would make him the godfather of Harlem, the first black man to sit at the table as an equal with the Italian mafia. But that Friday night in 1935, at the Alhambra Restaurant, Bumpy was just a man having dinner. A man who'd ordered spaghetti while another man's blood was still wet on the floor. That night, Bumpy Johnson didn't just destroy Ulissiz Rollins. He destroyed the idea that Harlem could be conquered by outside forces. Every mobster in New York heard the story. Every politician, every cop. And they all understood the same message. Harlem protects its own. Real power isn't just violence. Any thug can kill. Real power is control. It's precision. It's the ability to destroy a man and then calmly straighten your tie. It's sending a message so clear, so final, that you never have to send it again. 36 cuts. One message. One legend. That was the night Harlem learned who Bumpy Johnson really was.